Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, your ticket to all things college football. Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? Join us as we talk college football from the national championship to college rivalries to bowl games to the Heisman Trophy to which conference is the best. We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between.
What's going on? Welcome to the GSMC College Football Podcast, hosted on the GSMC Podcast Network. I am their host, like every usual, after Monday, or after the weekend on Monday. I'm recording this a little bit early. It's about 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So bear with me. I don't usually get up this early these days, but due to trying to create better habits, I'm up early trying to record. So here we go. College football in the midst of coronavirus has been tough for sports recently, as many of my fellow colleagues and friends alike are struggling either with lack of content or just lack of sports in general. So it's been a lot of video game playing to supplement time, a lot of rewatching sports or documentaries, a lot of reading some books. Maybe I'll give some book recommendations soon. I got to finish them first. I don't know how well they're going so far. I got to finish them, but we got to get started on some new hobbies, or brush up on the old ones. Can't just get slumped in and thinking that life is meaningless now since sports are gone. There's always new things to do. I heard there's a new Animal Crossing game out, and if you're a fan of Animal Crossing, you're going to enjoy your life quite a bit, because that's a hearty game of a lot of hours spent in there. You can do a lot. But with that said, college football has some news coming in, and then we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to do some interesting stuff near the back half of the podcast about the University of Alabama. I've watched them a lot over the years, as they've been one of the most successful programs in college football history, let alone in the last decade. Might be the most successful, first only to none, or second only to none, and the only team probably behind them maybe Clemson, maybe Ohio State, but Alabama. We're going to do a little bit of a interesting questionnaire, hot topic sort of rankings about certain things in their program over the last 10 years. So to start it off, though, I'm going to get into a bit of some news. So first things first, let's talk about Colorado Governor Jared Polis signed a bill on Friday that will help the state's college athletes profit off of their name, image, and likeness. Yep, NIL is back in the news, baby. According to USA Today, Steve Berkowitz, I don't know if I can pronounce this today. Berkowitz, there we go. Berkowitz. If I am butchering your name, Mr. Steve, I apologize. The bill is scheduled to take place January 1st, 2023, and that's the same day as California's Fair Pay to Play Act. California Governor Gavin Newsom signed the Fair Pay to Play Act into law last fall, and now it's making California the first state to do it, and now Colorado is now the second state, and there are supposedly 20 more states that include Illinois and New York having similar bills on the ballot, and the Florida legislator has also recently sent a similar bill to Governor Ron DeSantis, who previously announced his support in recent conversation. So now, the NCAA Board of Governors unanimously voted to permit students participating in athletics the opportunity to present from the use of their likeness, image, and name in a manner consistent with the collegiate model. Collegiate model that we don't really know yet because they're still working it out. NCAA has been slow on a lot of things, and one of the things that they are the most slowest about is, in fact, trying to get, collegiate athletes compensated for, NCAA making billions of dollars on their names, image, and likeness because the NCAA loves to make money. It is a cash cow in of itself. It prints money on the daily, and that's just the design of where it is, and they don't want to take away from their profits. But time has come, and now they have to act fast, or else the states will just start dividing and conquering, and they'll have no control over what they, as in the NCAA, will have no control on what they're willing to do. So they're finally trying to get behind the 8-ball here and finally get some things going. In other news, as we quickly move pace, is the coronavirus essentially has shut down a lot of sports, and with that being said, off-season workouts have been suspended for a majority, if not all, of collegiate sports for spring, and a lot of kids are getting sent home as colleges are going to fully online. I know for a fact that the University Systems of Georgia have gone fully to online for this semester, and even some of them have canceled their spring graduations, and obviously that means that their football teams are not participating in spring practices as of right now, and spring games for the most part have been either postponed, canceled, or delayed until further announcement. With that said, though, one college football team is staying in shape while staying at home. This was written by LeCan Littman. So UNC, their football conditioning coach, strength coach, his name is Brian Hess. Brian Hess. Like mess, but Hess. Brian Hess. So he is designing an at-home workout regimen and sending PDFs to his players, essentially, for multiple different positions and different skill sets. He's personalizing all of these exercises for his players in order to stay in shape at home, which includes, water jugs as dumbbells and potentially using coffee tables as benches, to do bench press. Sand in book bags or books in book bags and doing crazy type of squats. It's getting real creative out here. Like, I know you've been seeing some of those TikToks out there where guys are getting guys are really trying to get after it at home by doing planks and doing push-ups all over the place, and there's push-up challenges on Instagram that are showing people knowing one of two things: either everybody's out of shape and nobody knows how to properly do a push-up, and it's getting bad, so to speak. This coronavirus is showing. I mean, I'm glad people are trying to do their thing now. I guess it's a healthy challenge for once, but this one, you're definitely getting exposed if, you haven't been on your A game or in your push-up game. It's not at its highest peak where it should be. But, yeah, man, this is probably the best thing that could potentially do for, think of a strength and conditioning coach. You're losing so much valuable time because off season, those team workouts and morning workouts 2-a-days are not only just for building strength in players, but, it's a good place for, teammates and, group mates alike. So like offensive linemen and then the running backs group, the wide receivers group. They really start to build camaraderie early on, and they start to become closer together and get in sync because it's just a real big bonding session in the weight room, because you're around everybody, you get your workout in, everybody's trying to encourage each other to push themselves to, I guess they're against their limit, above what they think they can go all the time. So it's just a lot of testosterone in there. Now you're just at home doing online classes, and you're kind of thinking, well, you don't feel it's not as natural to you anymore. You're not going to somewhere else to work out. Your local gyms are probably either closed, and if not, they don't have the same sort of facilities and or equipment that you're used to. So it's definitely a different vibe and a different feeling for a lot of these athletes. So their coach is putting in the extra time to help them stay on track and keep them ready for the season when it does come back is really, really impressive, and something to keep in mind for when UNC really starts out well, or if they start off well, because if they start off well, you can look back to moments like this and be like, they did the extra mile as a coaching staff in order to push them into the next tier, because the ACC, there's one king, but everything else is kind of up for grabs. So they're definitely a contender here, and they have the number 4 recruiting class for 2021. So they have a 4-star recruit quarterback in Drake May, and he recently flipped from Alabama to UNC. So it's just going to be a big talking point for where UNC can really push themselves in the football conversation in the next few years. And it starts right now when you're getting your guys in, getting workouts in, even at home with coronavirus. All right. So let's take a break, and then we're going to get into some preseason top 25 rankings.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, so the official AP poll doesn't really come out until August, but people are really updating their list, and here's the latest one coming from the NCAA.com article. The top 3 really have not changed, which I did not expect them to, no matter what the situation at hand is in the current world of sports. Clemson, of course, number 1. This was set regardless of what happened in New Orleans. Trevor Lawrence is currently the best quarterback in the in the CFB college football world. And it's just not, it's a little bit close. Well, not really. I like to say it's not even close. But, the second, of course, would be probably Justin Fields in Ohio State. And Ohio State is ranked second on his list. But Clemson has a returning player in Travis Etienne, and he's their all-time leading rusher, and he wants to come back to school. Now, this is interesting for his decision. Now, I wonder how the virus has really, if he's ever questioned his decision. I probably doubt it, but, maybe he's rethinking some things now, but here we are. He's returning back to school, and that's definitely going to help Clemson in the long run as, you need good chemistry. He's a playmaker out there, and you can trust him with the ball in his hands to do some things in a very, very high-powered offense that you tend to see. So, Ohio State, number 2. They won't have J.K. Dobbins anymore, but Ohio State will have a great ground game, and Justin Fields, who had 51 touchdowns last year, which is insane. But they're just looking to really go back to back. So they have a big game against Oregon, September 12th, pending. We don't know when the season will start and if they ever have to push back. But if everything goes well and they can start right on schedule, they should play Oregon, which is a big game. Alabama, which we'll talk about even more later on, is expected to be in the third spot. Tua is gone, but the offense should still remain one of the nation's best. Mac Jones passed for 327 yards and 3 touchdowns against Michigan. But what does that really mean? Michigan's not, I don't know, man. Michigan's a weird team. I don't think they come with expectations anymore. They shouldn't, at least. You shouldn't expect Michigan to be any more than what they have been over the past few years. They may go around and get 9 or 10 wins, but at the end of the day, they are just not in the same level of competition as most top 10 teams even. And I don't know if that's because I don't believe Harbaugh is a bad coach. I just think that the talent level is not there, and coaching at some levels are at a higher clip than what he's been bringing to the table. So I don't really put too much stock in that Alabama win, or even in Mac Jones, but they do have a 5-star quarterback in Bryce Young, and on defense, Dylan Moses returns after missing last season with a torn ACL, so they'll have some returning players. One interesting tidbit is that they have LSU ranked 4th, and that is just out of insane to me because there's just too much loss on the LSU front for me to really believe that they can be 4th in the preseason rankings. They're going to have a real uphill battle, man. It's hard when you come back and after winning the title, you have to basically mentally prep yourself again to go out there and defend your title essentially and retool and for an attempt to repeat. And when you don't have like at least a few guys that were there with you, at least the coaching staff, now that's difficult because you're always going to lose players, right? You're always going to lose players to the draft every year. So that's to be expected. You're going to put people in the draft, and if they're that talented, they belong there in the first place. But when you lose crucial staff members, big-time personnel in the coaching area, that's when things start to get tough. And when you lose players at the same time as them, it really starts to become an uphill battle. And Orgeron is, he looks to be up for the challenge, but I don't know if it's weird to say a guy who just wins the national title if he's proved it enough. I don't know if he's proved enough for me to feel like, they can do it. I think it's maybe I'm just a little bit skeptical, or maybe I just worried because you don't really see it often, especially on this level scale of loss of personnel across the board, that this is really capable of happening. But not to mention they have what everybody's dealing with is the coronavirus. So that's just another level or another layer to this whole title defense season coming in. And 4th just seems a bit high to me, at least how I view them as a team currently constructed and currently formed. So we just have to check back in on that. They have Georgia 5, which I believe should probably be the 4th just on talent alone. They lose Jake Fromm and DeAndre Swift and 2 of its experienced linemen. But Georgia always brings in new talent. And at the end of the day, they'll figure it out. They bring in Jamie Newman from Wake Forest. So let's see what they can do. Let's see if they can really figure this one out. Because at the end of the day, I think Georgia fans are getting kind of tired of this. Our offense is very limited, but we have the strong defense, and our run game is running back university over here, which I find really interesting because running back university is literally Alabama. But here we are. If you want to talk about running backs going to the league and being successful, then maybe we have a different conversation. But as far as production at the college level, it's not even close. Alabama is just trumping everybody else around. But yeah, let's see it, because I believe their head coach coming out of this season is on a hot seat that a lot of people don't want to talk about. But Kirby Smart, if he doesn't find a way to get back into the playoffs and do some damage and really, really make a run at this title, it's not going to look good for his resume so far. And I don't know if that means he'll lose his job, but it'll definitely, people are starting to get restless in Athens, in the Athens community. Further on down the list, we have some Oregon, Oklahoma, which might be too high at 7, Penn State at 8, which seems about fair, Florida at 9, which is interesting, and 10 we have Auburn, which I like as a big time sleeper in this thing, because they're going to play Alabama and LSU, and it's really going to see some stuff. So they beat Rose Bowl champion Oregon, ended Alabama's title hopes, and battled LSU and Georgia in close games last year, and also lost to Minnesota in the Outback Bowl to end the season. But it was still a 9-win season. It looks like, Auburn is one of those teams that always finds a way. So I'm not going to give up hope in that team, because I've seen it many times where, people don't really count them in, or they're looking down on them. And then all of a sudden you just start seeing all the War Eagle chants, and it just, I need to look up where this War Eagle stuff comes from, because, obviously their mascot is not a War Eagle. So, it's just one of those things. So I'm going to follow Auburn a little bit tightly, because I really do believe in this season, one, still going on, and two, I think their team can really do some damage out there. So I'm going to look into that real closely here as we come up to the season, closely approaching us ever so slightly. So can't wait, man. Coming in to this season, we're going to look at all the rest of the top 25 and really, really go into the back half, because I think some people just look at the top 10 because that's what matters. And all of a sudden it's, it doesn't matter anymore past top 10 or top 12, because everybody else doesn't really have a shot of getting in, especially if they take a loss. But, it'll be interesting to look at. So we'll come back to that at a later time. But we're going to take our break, and then we're going to get into some Jameis Winston debacles, some debates, because I have some thoughts. That's coming up.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about one of the most interesting players in college football in the last decade or so, and that's Jameis Winston. So Jameis Winston was a standout Florida State quarterback who took them to a national title. Remember the team? It had him. I believe that team also had Kelvin Benjamin, who flamed out in the NFL. But during his time in Florida State, he was the big man on campus. And so was Jameis. And since then, Jameis has had some ups and some downs and all of that in between. And now he's in a free agency period where it seems like he is not getting any traction after, throwing 33 touchdowns, leading the league in passing yards, I believe. Or he led the league in touchdowns. And it was weird. I think he was second in passing yards. And, of course, he was very much first in interceptions thrown, as he threw 30 of them, which is a big reason for why, teams may be a bit hesitant into coming into this guy's contract negotiations. And I find it funny because I think a lot of people think Jameis Winston isn't good, or, he's not a elite guy, or he isn't a starter. And I think the question is, or I think the answer is, he is a starter. It's just that, do you want him to be your starter for the long term? And for many teams, I would say the answer is no, not really. Because he's just, he is what he is right now. And unless that drastically changes, and I don't know who's going to give him the chance right now to showcase those changes. We know what Jameis Winston has been since coming out of college. We knew what he was coming out of college, as in his college play. So I've seen that last year. It was very susceptible what his skill set was going to be in the NFL. The issue is he's just so talented. I was talking to my friend David a few hours ago and discussing this. This is what made me want to talk about this, was that Jameis Winston is probably the most talented quarterback we have seen, to where his decision making is literally the only thing holding him back from being a really, really good quarterback. And it's not to say Cam Newton has had decision making issues, or even Phillip Rivers at times, but Phillip Rivers is one of the most storied quarterbacks in the last 10 years. And, Cam has gone to a Super Bowl as well, and showcased a lot of skill and poise in the positions, has some really good highs. Jameis hasn't had the same highs as either of those two quarterbacks, but decision making, he's just a bang or bust player, and in the NFL at least. And college, you can kind of maneuver yourself into and out of bang or bust plays, because not everybody is at NFL level talent, and you can kind of outshine. Especially Florida State was recruiting back then, and they had really, really stacked teams when James played, and really, really nice talent. And Tampa Bay really was no different offensively. They really gave him, in this last year for sure, his offensive talent was through the roof. You want to talk about Mike Evans, you want to talk about Godwin, you want to talk about O.J. Howard, who didn't play as much, but he was still out there. And then you had, of course, somebody who came out in the same draft, Rashad Perriman came out in his same draft. And I wanted to go back and look at this draft and think about this from perspective of who all came out in that first round, and do the Tampa Bay Bucks roll the dice if they knew everything they knew about Jameis now, or back then what they've known now, right? And they have to do the draft over. Do they take him again, or do they roll the dice on somebody else? So let's see. Quarterback candidates. We have, wow, that is not good as far as the next quarterback taken within, the next two draft picks. But, let's see. So, all right. Here we are in the Wikipedia page. James was taken first quarterback off the board. Marcus Mariota was taken directly second. Also, side note for some college talk, because this is a college football show, ACC had the most players taken in the first round in the 2015 draft, which is really interesting because the SEC is kind of notorious for being a draft stuffer supreme when it comes to putting people in the first round. As far as the entire draft, I have not done the head count, but I do know in the first round there was a lot of ACC talent out there, and ACC represented a lot in the 2013 through the 2016 era, and then Clemson was getting out there. Top ACC had some top echelon talent come out, and it's no surprise to see that this was the case. So here we are, first round guy that Jameis Winston also played with. I finally found it. It was Brashad Perriman, who went to Baltimore. So that's interesting. UCF. Represent. All right, so I'm still looking for the third quarterback off the board, which looks like it was Garrett Grayson, New Orleans Saints. He did not stay very long there. And then we had Sean Manion from Oregon State. Bryce Petty, fourth rounder. I remember Bryce Petty. And then this was probably a really, really bad quarterback draft. Brett Hundley, who had a few stints in Green Bay in his own right. And then we're still moving down. And wow, this was just not the quarterback. Trevor Siemian, who had his stints as well. And some notable undrafted players. So let's see some undrafted guys from that year. None of them being quarterback. So, right. So that's your quarterback pool. You need a quarterback. They definitely needed it at the position. Some notable standouts that are non-quarterbacks that were drafted underneath him were Amari Cooper, Leonard Williams, Todd Gurley, Andrews Pete, Melvin Gordon, Devontae Parker, who has come into his own, Eric Armstead, who just got a big contract, Marcus Peters, Nelson Aguilar was in there, Shaq Thompson, Brian Jones, Landon Collins went in the second round, Jalen Collins went in the second round at LSU, Devin Funchess, T.J. Yeldon, Mario Edwards Jr., Eric Kendricks, who's a big-time linebacker. So, of course, you'll never know. The draft is really big and has a lot of really interesting players in there. So you can't say they would know all of this off the top of their head. But I would have to say that they roll the dice again with Jameis when I look at this. Because there's no player on this list that I feel changes the course of Tampa Bay's career really at all until you move. You really just have to think about it like this. Jameis, with the right coach, I think can do some things. And I think his talent is worth a lot of money. He could be really, really, really good with the right coach. And Bruce Arians looked like to be the right coach. But his decision making was honestly, it's just so bad. It's god awful. And it really, really just changes the whole landscape of his career. But if you could clean it up and somebody takes a chance on him, you'd have to assume that he can really be a really good quarterback in this league and really start for a long time. Just side note, maybe if they don't take him and they go, they take the tank route as far as quarterback concerned, their picks they could be in the top 2 again. They could have gotten Carson Wentz or Jared Goff. And that right there is all you need to know after that, because there's Paxton Lynch, and then there's Christian Hackenberg, and then, of course, you get further down the line and you get Jacoby Brissett, Cody Kessler, Connor Cook. Oof. Dak Prescott's down there, so, Cardale Jones is out there in 4th round, who, oof. We've seen enough of Cardale Jones. I've seen enough of Cardale Jones. personally. It's just Brandon Allen, Jeff Driscoll, Brandon Jotley. It's just all over the place. But yeah, man, Jameis, I think you can do it, man. It's just, you got to clean it up. All right, let's take another break, and then we're going to get into our Alabama stuff.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, so if you know me or you've listened to me talk about anything football related before, you know, bar none, my favorite position to watch, play, root for, to stand, to follow, to track, to talk about is in fact the running back position. So I love running backs, and two of the jerseys that I own in my life are running back jerseys. They are, and if you ever need a pop quiz on, you know, my life, I'll ask some questions soon. But it's Reggie Bush and Alvin Kamara, because those two changed my life. As far as watching New Orleans Saints, I just love watching them play. And as soon as Alvin Kamara came on the scene and he was just all over the place, I was hooked. So, of course, University of Georgia claims that they have the best running back system in college football, which, to be honest, they might have in the last few years. But we all know from 2010 to 2020, like all overall, Alabama has supplemented college football with some of the greatest running back performances and greatest running back seasons we've seen in a very long time. So I'm going to try and rank the top 5 of said position just from my taste and what I watched for a long time. And I'll be starting from 5, which would be the least, and 1 being the best. All right, so I think this might be controversial as the fifth guy off this list already. But, well, no, I don't think it won't be controversial, because I actually think that the guy who could be in this spot is a bit overrated. So here we go. I think that Najee Harris is the 5th best. and I mean off of talent and what I expect from him coming out of this season. So far, he has 2,241 rushing yards, 18 TDs, 356 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns. He might end up being one of the most talented running backs to come out of Alabama in recent time, just because of his skill set. He's just humongous. He's so fast, so strong, and I mean, this isn't anything new for Alabama running backs to be seen like this. But this guy is 6'2", 229. Absolute unit, so to speak. He is insane. He's super fast, 5-star recruit, all over the place. So he played 14 games as a freshman, but had limited carries behind Damian Harris, Bo Scarborough, and Josh Jacobs. What a running back core right there. He was third in the depth chart behind Damian Harris and Josh Jacobs. His sophomore year, played in 15 games and almost had 1,000 yards with 783 on 117 carries, scoring 4 TDs. And then, of course, when Damian Harris and Josh Jacobs went to the NFL, he had 1,224 yards, 13 TDs. Speculation would be that he would declare for the 2020 draft, but he decided to return for his senior season. So this guy decides to come back, and he's going to try and make a more cemented name for himself, probably because he feels that his freshman season really wasn't enough, I would assume. But I have to assume this guy is going to run like at least a 4.5, and he's just going to be out of control when he comes out. So he's 5 on the list for me. Number 4. I think I have to go with Trent Richardson. And that's Alabama-wise, Trent Richardson was if you want to talk about the typical Alabama running back, Trent Richardson was that guy. Trent Richardson was somebody who, in all honesty, was the truck guy. I've never seen somebody just bulldoze his way out of he was, oh my gosh, 5'9", right? He ran a 4.45, and he was a thick man. He was a kind of like the bowling ball method of running the football. 229. So keep in mind, Najee Harris is 229, but he's 6'2", so he carries it in a different way. But Trent was 5'9", so my height really. So this is me at 229, full muscle, just running a 4.4. This guy was just all average. He averaged 3.3 in the NFL, but he averaged 5 yards a carry and 259 rushing yards in college and 2 touchdowns. That's his average. Like, what? You can't make this up. He was compared to Emmitt Smith, and then he also drew comparisons to Michael Turner, of course, Michael Turner, the burner Turner, the bowling ball, and O.J. Simpson, considered a 5-star recruit by Rivals.com, and was the number 2 running back prospect in the nation, only behind Bryce Brown. And he chose Alabama. He was honestly one of the most standout running backs I've ever seen. Really played in college, and it's a shame that his NFL career really took a nosedive. But wow, he was the best running back available in the NFL 2012 draft, and he cemented his reputation with a strong play over the course of the year. But then he had minor knee surgery, and then he did not participate in the combine, and then he ended up getting drafted by Cleveland in the first round, 3rd overall pick, and then he was traded to Minnesota. All right, he was then they traded picks for Minnesota at the head of the Buccaneers, and then he was the highest selected draft pick at the running back position since Reggie Bush, when selected 2nd in 2006. So he got surgery on his knees, missed the entire preseason, returned, had his debut against Philadelphia, where he rushed 39 yards on 19 carries. But he ended up having a 1,000-yard season, I believe. But then things just kind of catapulted into nothingness. So it was a tough break for that young man, but I still believe that he was quite a phenomenal player for College Spear. So shout out to Trent Richardson for making my college lifestyle an interesting watch. So here we are, number 3. Who could it be, right? Number 3, I have to put Eddie Lacy up there. He is kind of a weird guy. Eddie Lacy was really good in college, but I never felt Eddie Lacy as the guy. But when he came to the NFL, he looked like he was like a really good player, typical Alabama workhorse, somebody who could really get job done in the running back position. And then something that I didn't mention earlier. Trent Richardson had 730 yards receiving and 7 touchdowns, which is kind of insane for a running back coming out of Alabama. There's only a few that really touch that kind of numbers. And he has more than the typical cast when you look at kind of pass catching running backs. So interesting. Regardless, Eddie Lacy, kind of your standard running back, and he's a guy that you know, he kind of just teetered off at the end of his NFL career, but during the 2010-2012 run, he really was a guy that you couldn't really mess with. And, you know, he learned some stuff from Mark Ingram. Of course, he learned some stuff from Mr. Eddie Lacy. From Trent Richardson. And from there on, it was just able to do some stuff. All right, so for the last two, I would have to say Mark Ingram is a slight under at the 2. I love Mark Ingram. Of course, he was on my favorite team, New Orleans Saints. I was sad to see him leave, but Mark Ingram, he won the Heisman. A lot of these guys won Heismans, of course, but Mark Ingram, he won the Heisman. He had 670 receiving yards and 4 TDs. He rushed for 42 touchdowns and 3,261 yards rushing. So he played from 2008 to 2010 on his team, was drafted in the first round to the New Orleans Saints. And, you know, he was just a stud. He played in that Tebow era, but he really got the job done, and he was just a man amongst boys. I've never seen a running back run so hard before, really ever. He was like the first guy that I really, really paid attention to running the football after Reggie Bush, because I didn't really watch college football that much, comparative to until Mark Ingram really came around, because it just made it interesting. And then the Tim Tebow talk of him coming out in the draft really sold me on watching college football and watching more college sports in general. But Mark Ingram was a man amongst boys, and you could never change my mind that he was one of the best to ever touch the rock in college. And then, of course, number 1 is that guy, Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is a battering ram of a running back beyond belief. So he's 6'3", 238, runs a 4.5. And you watched him last season in the AFC, just running amok to no degree. Guys come from Florida. He's 26 years old, drafted in the second round. Talk about value right there. Second round pick. Had the talent of a first rounder, but this is about the time when running backs were not. Folks realized that taking a running back in the first round is not probably the best decision to do for your life, but he did a lot. So Derrick Henry, he was an Alabama Crimson Tide, drafted in the second round by the Titans in 2015. He broke the Herschel Walker single-season college rushing yards record in the SEC, won the Heisman Trophy in 2015, as well as the Don Walker Award, Maxwell Award, and Walter Camp Award, and he holds the national high school football record for career rushing yards. He led the NFL in rushing yards in 2019, as well as rushing touchdowns, and tied with the Green Bay Packers running back Aaron Jones. So, as a senior in high school against Jacksonville Jackson, who averaged 9 yards per carry, 327 yards per game as a senior. And he finished the season with a state record of 4,261 yards and 55 touchdowns. He finished his high school career with 12,124 career rushing yards and broke Ken Hall's career record. He also rushed for 153 touchdowns, and his career touchdown totals ranked 5th all-time. In 4 years of UL, he averaged more than 250 yards a game and never rushed for less than 100 yards in any game. That is insane. He also was a sprinter for UL and posted a personal best of an 11.11 seconds in the 100-meter dash at the District 3 Championships, and he placed 7th. He was also a member of the 4x100 and the 4x400 squads. Of course, he was a 5-star recruit. This man was an animal. And that's all you need to say about Mr. the Fantastic, Derrick Henry. All right. So that was Derrick Henry. That's the top 5 for me. So Derrick Henry, Mark Ingram, Eddie Lacy, Trent Richardson, and of course, Najee Harris. That's my top 5. All right. So we're going to take a break here now, and then we're going to talk about best Alabama team of the decade.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So I wanted to come back and talk about more Alabama things because I believe they're a really important team of the last decade to really dive into and talk about. And thinking about teams like football, there's no I in it. There's a lot of people involved in making these teams happen. And of course, there's a head coach in Nick Saban who has been talked about in the ranks of some of the best of all time to ever do it. And Nick Saban, since 2009, has been a winner personified, just overall at any time I've ever seen. So let's talk about it. Who have been the best? What is the best? Who is the best? What year is the best college football team from Alabama? And we're going to try and go by the years they won the national titles. I think I'm going to go with, let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 national titles won since 2009. So let's go ahead and dive in and see which one is I consider, or this one I will consider the best. So let's go with 2009, which is a real interesting year because this is their, this is some of their standout guys. Wide receiver, Earl Alexander was a junior. Mark Ingram was a sophomore in 2009. Julio Jones was a sophomore in 2009. Eddie Lacy was a freshman. Trent Richardson, freshman. Then we have on defense, Mark Barron. We have Marcel Darius, Dante Hightower, Kareem Jackson, Ronaldo McClain. That is a pretty stout group right there, if I do say so myself. Quarterback is not so great. Greg McElroy didn't do much at all after his college stint, but it's just something to put that into conversation. James Carpenter, left tackle, pretty good. Lorenzo Washington, defensive end. Some of these guys, of course, did not start full on within their peak roles here when they got here, but this was Dante Hightower's starting season, inside linebacker along with Ronaldo McClain, two guys who had plenty of NFL playtime. Mark Barron, starting strong safety. Kareem Jackson was a starting cornerback. Dre Kirkpatrick was on the bench in third spot. So, interesting team. I don't know if that is the best, but there's a lot of interesting names there. So, in that year, Eastern Division was 8-0 for Florida, and they won 13-1. So you know what that meant. They went to the national title and played against Alabama, who also went 8-0 And interesting enough, there was nobody else ranked in the Eastern Division at the time. There was 2 others ranked outside of Alabama in the top 25, which was Ole Miss at 20, who went 4-4, 9-4 overall, and LSU, who went 5-3 and went 9-4 overall. Alabama, of course, went 14-0 in this season. I think this one would probably be probably 3 or 4, honestly. I think there are a lot better teams coming down the pipeline, I believe, that definitely make this season not look as strong as it might be. The wins, though, the wins that matter. This was in the BCS title game stuff, so there was no college football playoffs in 2009. Let's look at 2011. What do we have? We have a 12-1 season. So this was, of course, the versus LSU season, where LSU was number 2, went 8-0 and lost in a very, very, very sickening fashion. This was the Jordan Jefferson year. I remember it very, very fondly, what that season looked like. But here we are, standout players. Tight end Michael Williams. We had some Mark Barron as a senior here. C.J. Mosley as a sophomore. Dante Hightower again, junior. Drake Kirkpatrick was here. A lot of good defensive players in this one. As you know, LSU could not get past the 50-yard line in the national championship in this game. And for good reason. Jesse Williams, defensive end. Josh Chaplin, nose tackle. Damian Square. Courtney Upshaw at wide side linebacker. Nico Johnson, and then Dante Hightower. Mark Barron at free safety this time around. And they had Drake Kirkpatrick and Daquan Menzie. They had Marquise Mays. Barrett Jones at left tackle. I thought he played right tackle. They had some interesting stuff. A.J. McCarron, so that's a much better quarterback than they had in 2009. Trent Richardson and Eddie Lacy, the two-headed puncher right there. One of the reasons why I believe that Trent Richardson was one of the good players, just because they were just all over the place. Their MVP was Trent Richardson, captain Mark Barron, Dante Hightower, Trent Richardson. Just all over the place. They played a pro-style offense back then. It was just downtown.com. But I really do think they are probably 5th on this list. Don't think they had it really all together, especially when you get into the air raid attack that we get to later on down the line here. So in 2012, we get to even more things. So C.J. Mosley, of course, was MVP. And there's a whole lot of... 2012 was a weird year for guys, but Amari Cooper was on this team, Eddie Lacy, T.J. Yeldon, Kenyon Drake. So some big names here. We have A.J. McCarron still in there, throwing footballs around. Their wide receiver group, really outside of Amari Cooper, was kind of lackluster, to say the least. And outside of that, there just wasn't really much going on. But they ended up doing pretty well, 7-1, and ended up winning the national title. LSU was 14th. Number 5 was Texas A&M that year. I think that might be one of those mysterious Menzel years. Georgia was 7-1 in conference, 12-2 overall, who was also tied 5th. Number 9 was Florida, and then South Carolina was 8. Remember when South Carolina was good? Crazy time, man. Vanderbilt was ranked back then, 23rd. Man, 2012 was maybe the world did finish off in 2012, because wow. I don't know. I'm really starting to reconsider this. There's a lot of Alabama teams were all over the place, but I do know the last 2 are really, really strong. But here we go. So, departures from the 2014 squad. Amari Cooper left, T.J. Yeldon left, Landon Collins, DeAndrew White, Blake Sims. We got some Brian Volger left as well. So here we go. Returning starters. So Alabama had 7 returning starters on offense. Derrick Henry, Ryan Kelly, Cam Robinson, O.J. Howard. So defense, we had a Mateus Smith, not Geno Smith, the quarterback. Cyrus Jones, Jaron Reed, Sean Robinson, Jonathan Allen, and Reggie Ragland. So this was when Lane Kiffin was still around, offensive coordinator. And this was his second consecutive season at the position. So here we go. Eddie Jackson, free safety. Reggie Ragland, inside linebacker. Reuben Foster, a absolute unit of a player. Marlon Humphrey at cornerback. Minkah Fitzpatrick at the 2 guy. Cyrus Jones at 2. Minkah was probably in the slot. Place Calvin Ridley was there. Robert Foster. It was just, they really started to tacking on the wide receiver position. Ken Robinson at left tackle. Ryan Kelly at safety or at center. And then Jake Cocker was the quarterback of this generation, which makes sense because why do you need to throw when you have Derrick Henry toting the rock with Damian Harris and Kenyon Drake holding up the caboose? And that's probably team number 2, honestly. That's a strong team number 2. Here we go. So 2017, this will be the last team to win a national title here, and this was the team, of course, with the double quarterbacks. So we had the Jalen Hurts, and we also had the Tua Tagovailoa. This was the big game of the comeback, where Jalen Hurts was not playing very well, and he came back and won it all with Tagovailoa. So we have Ronnie Harrison, Minkah Fitzpatrick at strong safety, Inferny Jennings, Sean Deion Hamilton, Rashad Evans, Christian Miller, Raquan Davis, Darren Payne, Deshaun Hand, Anthony Everett, Tony Brown, Calvin Ridley, Henry Ruggs III, Robert Foster, Devonta Smith, Jalen Hurts, Tua Tagovailoa, Damian Harris, Bo Scarborough, and Josh Jacobs. Now, as a team construct, this team was very interesting. They were just not really bad team at all. I don't think they're first category. So I think the way this will go here is I think the 2015 squad takes number 1 for me. Number 2 goes to 2015. Number 3 has to go to 2011. 2009 has to be 4th, and 2012 has to be 5th, just off of principle, I think. So those are my guys, man. I think that's the rankings. All right. So we're going to go ahead and take our final break here, and we're going to get into our last segment of the day.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
All right, so I wanted to finish off the podcast on, I guess, Alabama note once again. This is to build their Mount Rushmore. So there are 4 guys that make up, I guess, Alabama in this decade. Who are the most memorable people that you can think of? Be like, you know what? That defined Alabama right there. Those were the guys. That was the team. That is the secret sauce of this Alabama chili. I wonder does Alabama have chili contests? Let me know. If you're from Alabama, let me know if you guys have chili contests, and if so, where are they at so I can come and be a taste tester. All right, so here we go. Number one, I'm getting this out the way now so people don't come and murder me later on. But Nick Saban, of course, is on the Mount Rushmore of this decade because he is hands down the most successful coach in college football right now in the last 10 years. And he's one of the best coaches in college football ever. The title of best coach year by year has been challenged so far. And you may have not won it every year this past few years. I know you can't say he's won it this past year after what Orgeron and their coaching staff has done. And maybe not even when he lost against Dabo Swinney, he may have been outcoached. But for the most part, we all understand that Nick Saban is the Bill Belichick, the Greg Popovich of college football, and has been like that for quite some time. So he has to be up there, right at the top spot. So who is next on the list, right? Who is the guy? I have to say, on the Mount Rushmore of Alabama in the decade, Julio Jones has to be on there. Julio Jones, if I think back for when wide receivers were drafted in the last few years, he has to be probably number one, right? Let me make sure. Let me see, because he was drafted, I believe in 2011. He was in that draft. So let me just make sure I have this correct before I make the statement that he was said the best. Yeah, so if Calvin Johnson was drafted in 2007, which I thought he was drafted before for Julio, then this makes sense. Julio Jones has been the best wide receiver to date drafted, probably in the NFL, and lived up to the hype of his draft pick. And in Alabama, he was said the guy, the star player, out and about. Of course, there was Mark Ingram at the time there as well, but when it came down to making some big plays, they both were amazing guys. But I think Julio kind of takes the cake here, right there at the number 2 spot for me, because he was just so dynamic, made every play that you could ever imagine. Interestingly enough, I believe that, Julio's hands were not always there when he first got into the NFL, but then he shored his hands up real quick, and he became one of the best deep threats we've seen in the last few years, and a guy that could rival any wide receiver as far as talent that we've seen come into the NFL, and really has made a staple name for himself inside the Hall of Fame cases. And, eventually, if he ever does get a championship, he will be for sure a lock for a high ballot into the Hall of Fame. And his records are being broke, or he's breaking records every year. And, first to X amount of yards, first to this many touchdowns. He's just an animal. He's a monster. All right. Next on the list, have to pick a running back, and it's tough. It's real tough. I feel like I want to say Mark Ingram has to be on there, but I think Derrick Henry, for essentially carrying that team to a national title, have to put him up there. I think that he did a lot for that 2015 squad, and I don't think he gets enough credit for what he really did. And you're seeing it now in NFL that he kind of took his mentality of college and just kind of transferred it there, because he did in high school, did it in college, and now it's kind of clicking in the NFL at a high level to where he is literally carrying teams on his back every single time on the field. And he's doing it with a little relative ease. Like, it doesn't seem, he just kind of, the more he runs, the more he seems to like get angrier and seem fresher. It's like, he's kind of like a berserker. Like, if you ever played Dungeons and Dragons, kind of like a berserker type, where the more you hit him, the stronger he becomes, and the more powerful he is, and the more perks he gets while he's running the football. And I don't know if there's any RPG heads out there, but don't want to mess with the berserker when he's out raging. So it's crazy. Yeah, I know. I watch football and I also enjoy a bit of 5e D&D. So any of you guys who play D&D 5e 3.5 or maybe Pathfinder, if you're those type of people, shout out to you guys. I want to get back into the D&D sort of lifestyle, but it's been tough because not everybody's available, and we're also in a kind of a nationwide social distancing / quarantine sort of thing. So it's a little bit tough to do such things. I think the last guy I want to put on this list. All right, I've been thinking long and hard here who I want to include. And it's going to be a linebacker. And I think it's going to be C.J. Mosley. Now, C.J. Mosley was a very, very interesting man in Alabama, because I think his college career is a bit undervalued and underrated, and I don't think a lot of people like to talk about it. He's 6'2", 250, amazing height, amazing talent. He was a consistent freshman All-American in 2010, selected for the FWAA. He was also played 13 games as a true freshman, so that qualifies a lot. You have to be a true freshman for this list. He dislocated his right elbow in the first quarter of the fourth game of 2011 against Arkansas. He missed the following two games. Against Florida and Vanderbilt, and did not record a tackle the next game in Mississippi. Mosley shared the starting weak side job with Nico Johnson, and Alabama coaches used Mosley more as a pass coverage guy. But as a junior, he was recognized as a first-team All-American after the 2012 season. He was, after the year, Dante Hightower made AP All-American first team, and Courtney Upshaw made second team. He made the team in 2012. Alabama had a linebacker on that team first through third teams, and for four of the previous 5 years. Mosley led the team in tackles in 2012 with 107. Dre DePrice was second with 59. Put that in perspective. He was all over the field. Mosley finished third for the 2012 Butkus Award and goes to the country's best linebacker behind Notre Dame's Manti Te'o and Jarvis Jones from Georgia. Mosley earned Alabama's MVP award in 2012. Mosley's 3 career interception returns for touchdowns tied Alabama record. In his senior year, he led the team tackles with 108, so one more than last year. And he averaged the most tackles per game in his college career. 2013, Mosley was a semifinalist for the Lombardi Bernarek in the Butkus Award, while Missouri Tigers' Michael Sam was often remembered as the 2013 SEC Defensive Player of the Year. He and Mosley actually shared the award. So I think a lot of things go unsaid, but I think C.J. Mosley was one of the best linebackers to come in recent time, and I don't think he got his just due diligence in college as far as the awards go. But that's kind of how it works in college. There's a lot of teams, a lot of conferences, and a lot of players to watch. So sometimes it doesn't always go to the best prospect overall, especially when their careers pan out. But in college, they deserve the awards they got. But that is, I believe that's my Mount Rushmore, guys. So that's it for the GSMC College Football Podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and keeping it locked in here with us during your tough times and our tough times here, as it's a scary time for our nation, but we shall get through. Don't forget to follow our social media for all the latest and greatest about college football. And don't forget to keep it tuned with us next week and more weeks to come. So thank you all for listening. Don't forget to rate and review us. See you all next week.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From football to basketball, baseball to MMA, and even soccer. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast.